I can't tell you how busy me and Jim are right now. And at the time of this recording, which is going to show up on January 30th, 2026, the announcement had not have been made yet. So, this is kind of a build up. So I'm going to go ahead and do the intro for who we had on our show today. We have on our show Dan Martin. For any of you who have played Star Trek related video games or Star Trek video games, you will know that name. He is the writer for Star Trek Resurgence, a very popular Star Trek video game. And so we're going to cut over to the interview that me and Jim had with him, because part of writing and part of storytelling now, another medium is video games. We've had plenty of different types of writers, from comics, from novels, everything on this show. Again, I'm Michael Dismuke. You can see me at michaeldismuke.com, all the work I do for Star Trek Adventures, plus some. And Jim Johnson, of course, you know who Jim Johnson is. He's the project manager for Star Trek Adventures RPG. So let's go ahead and start tiptoeing into the realm of video games on Continuing Conversations, Infinite Stories and Infinite Combinations. Oh, man, like I said, this show gets better and better just for the fact that now we are really diving in to even storytelling in video games this year. I'm really excited about that. Dan Martin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
All right. And again, you're a newbie. So, Jim, toss him the questions.
Yeah, so as is a tradition on our show for the last 4 or 5 years now, anytime we have a new guest on, we always ask 2 questions for you. First question: if you are able to, piece out the 60 years worth of Star Trek, stage, screen, books, novels, comic books, everything Star Trek, video games even, who is your single favorite character in all Star Trek? And if you could pick one series, what would be your favorite series?
That is, really difficult to try to break down. I think that I've got a certain personal attachment to 2 of them because I got to write for them in the Star Trek Resurgence game. But I'm going to, just out of sheer random merch, I'm going to say that I'm going to go with Spock, because I have this cool Spock Lives Search for Spock commemorative glass. Nice. So it'll be Spock, but the runner-up, or 1A and 1 Alpha, are it's also Riker, because Jonathan Frakes is awesome in many ways, and it was fun writing for him. And Riker is an interesting character because you look at him and you wonder, well, who's the guy that's been second fiddle for a very long time, and what's he like when he gets to be the captain? And as it turns out, I think he learned a lot of lessons over the years, and he's a really good captain, is my opinion. And I think we get to see it in a couple of official live action media and animated media, but we also got to put our stamp on it in Star Trek Resurgence as well.
And we know the show kept him in first officer position because they had to, because he was under contract. But do you think he should have taken a captaincy sooner?
I think it would have been really interesting if there had been sort of a Deep Space Nine style season where, say, there had been, more of a conflict between the Federation and the Cardassians in, let's just say, season 5, right? Patrick Stewart has re-upped his contract after season 3, I think they had written him into the Best of Both Worlds because they weren't sure if they were going to get him back. But, imagine he was well established, he was back, and then they were like, well, what are we going to do with Riker that's interesting? They have all these opportunities to take him out. But, what if you made a battle group, right? And I could imagine Captain Picard being temporarily put to Commodore in charge of his own battle group to take on some new and exciting threat, and that Riker would be, maybe he would be on some Nebula class or something.
I love it. We love riffing on this show. I could see exactly what you're saying. Like, Picard is sent to go hunt the Borg as Commodore, and Riker's one of the ships in the fleet.
Absolutely.
Oh, that would be sick. Oh.
Sounds like something you can really do really well in an RPG, or maybe certain types of video games where you can do those kind of branching storylines, and TV at the time probably couldn't make it work, but even now you could make Captain Riker a spinoff and see where it goes. Yeah. So Dan, I have to ask, because you mentioned Spock, are you a fan of Spock, the aggregate character across all the series, or are you more of a Nimoy Spock fan, or Ethan Peck, or even Zachary Quinto?
Well, I think they all bring something special to the character, but it is definitely Leonard Nimoy's character at its heart. And in Star Trek Resurgence, this is not a spoiler, it's in the trailer, we do have our version of Spock, and we took it very seriously. And we had a phenomenal voice actor take on the role of Spock. And it's, it's not just doing an impersonation. People can do impersonations of Leonard Nimoy and sound convincingly, but it's a voice doubling where he's got to be able to act in a lot of scenes. Spock is in a lot of scenes in Star Trek Resurgence, so it couldn't just be somebody that sounds like him. It had to be somebody that could bring a sense of rhythm to the speech that sounds right. And Scott Michael, the actor who did Spock in Star Trek Resurgence, he's done a lot of voice acting, and he's done acting on screen. One of the things that I knew him from was Bill and Ted Face the Music. That's Bill and Ted 3, where he was also the voice of George Carlin in the role of Rufus. And I didn't know it at the time, but like he sounded, it was perfect. It was a perfect version of him. And the way that Piotr described it is it's very technical in terms of, like, he does research into where people that he's doubling are from. And he figured out one of the ways to sound like Leonard Nimoy was that going all the way back to Leonard Nimoy grew up in East Boston, and he was able to say, okay, well that's why he says censors, because he's trying to fight against his natural Boston accent that would have dropped the R. Yeah, we got we're picking something up on the senses.
I did not know that. That's so cool. I mean, these people are talented. People may underestimate voiceover actors, but like studying it to that level of culture and etymology is just like so cool.
And not to jump like too deep into it, but like when we're doing
jump deep into it, by the way. That's what we like hearing here.
Okay, good. We're going straight into the technical stuff. When we're doing a branching narrative story like the ones that I typically work on, the scripts are these kind of fractals of content, and it's very, very difficult for actors to be able to track the through line of the scene, because it splits off and comes back and splits off, and then something doesn't come back. And it's a credit to everybody that steps to the microphone to do that kind of work. But then there are also those who have a special just sort of knack for it, and those are the people you want to work with all the time, because there'll be times where they're tracking the situation as well or better than you are, and you're like, wait a minute, who's this? Are they friends in this one, or is what? And he's like, no, I got it. And it's
good question. Now you're making me have a lot of questions. So when you're designing the game, would you say you're directing it to like those scenes? Are you giving scene direction in order for the voice actors to know how to emote?
I mean, so for the types of games that I've typically worked on, Telltale games and Star Trek Resurgence with Dramatic Labs, it's a very writer-driven media where it's where some games start with like, let's make a cool level, we've got these new guns we want to put into it, or this new mechanic of crafting we want to put together where you got to chop down trees and then build houses or whatever. This type of thing I work on generally starts with the story, and it looks like a screenplay for most of it. And it's just a screenplay that's kind of been put through a horizontal paper shredder, and you keep trying to put it together in ways that make sense. There's a fantastic tool, first at Telltale, and then in sort of a new iteration for the type of work we did on Star Trek Resurgence, called Beany, which is this combination flowcharting tool, screenwriting tool, and front end of a driving Unreal Engine that it allows you to look at the story as a map. You can put it out as a script. and then it ultimately puts the game together as well.
You make it sound like a choose your own adventure book, the same way you put it together.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it is.
Yeah.
The real difference with a choose your own adventure, sort of conceptually, and one of these branching narrative games is that a choose your own adventure book, you could get to the end in 3 flips of the page, or you could take 30 flips, because sometimes you end up in a very different place, and that's just sort of the end of the story, and then you can start over. We have something a little similar in that you sometimes have a hard fail in an action scene or something, but whether it's these games or something like something from Quantic Dreams, I can't remember the one with the robots, I'm drawing an absolute blank on it, Become Human, or Detroit Become Human. You'll have an action scene that ends with you getting killed, and then it starts over. But for the most part, you're following a story from start to finish, and depending on the amount of, both the philosophy and the budget, you're still going to go from some A to some B, and production realities dictate that there's going to be something similar to it, right? You're going to go to similar places and see similar people, and the choices you make aren't going to necessarily send you off to like, Klingon House Civil War on one playthrough, and then on another playthrough, you're, creating a new race of sentient rocks, right? That's not what we sign up to make, and it's not what people generally sign up to play. And so people will ask, well, how many endings are there? But the real, what I think is the more important question is, how many good endings are there? Because I look at it, and I look at it in pretty traditional terms. I went to film school. I worked in linear media for a while before I got into interactive. And there's a saying in Hollywood that your third act problems are actually first act problems. Yes. And when it comes to telling some sort of branching narrative, you can only have so many interesting endings, and endings that feel satisfying and feel like there's been an author's hand that brought you there based off of one beginning, because it all starts at one point, and it does start to branch early, but like your first act has to set up your third act, and it can only, if it were something that really were truly mathematically a factorial, right? I think it's or maybe it's I can't remember what the mathematical term is for it, but whether it's exponential or factorial, you just could not make enough interesting endings out of a beginning that every minute branches in 3 different ways.
I'm gonna have a good question for you later on that I'm gonna ask you.
Okay.
I'm gonna come back to this. Yeah.
I will say though that a lot of what you're talking about anticipated my first question, because I was going to ask you, given your background working on, as a screenwriter, but also as an interactive, narrative designer, and you've worked on, Halo and Games of Thrones, and of course Star Trek Resurgence. There's clearly differences between writing a linear screenplay versus writing this much more broader narrative fiction, where at first I was thinking you probably must have had a spreadsheet to keep track of all the different dialogue blocks, but it sounds like your tool is even more involved in that. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit with your breadth of experience, like writing a screenplay versus writing this type of intense narrative. Like, what are some of the other differences that you'd notice? And do you have a preference?
It's interesting. I drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, on interactive along the way, because it was not what I set out to do. I went to film school. I studied film production. I focused on writing for traditional media, and it was happenstance that got me into interactive. And it's very similar. There are a lot of differences, but I found myself being changed in my own personal projects that I was writing by my work in these interactive projects. For example, one of the easy ways to look at it was I started working in something that was essentially an episodic format. So back at Telltale, it was 5-episode seasons that were each about an hour and a half to 2.5 hour long, each episode. So I ended up, for my personal writing, focusing more on television than features, just because I started thinking in long form terms. The other thing is that I would start looking at moments and thinking, oh, this is a great choice moment, not just a great moment, because there's a lot that goes into what makes a great choice for the player, because it has to be one of the things that people think about is, oh, well, I got all the things you could possibly choose, right? But it has to ask you to risk or invest something to be meaningful. And then on the flip side, the other side of that choice, there has to be interesting content that for us making it is worth building down the line and continuing with. Because if you make if you give somebody a really interesting choice, but like that choose your own venture book, one of the paths ends with them dying at the end of the scene. It doesn't continue the experience, and you might offer them, well, okay, so you made the wrong choice. Now go back and make the right choice. One of the tenets of something that these games I work on that are choice based is that there are no wrong choices. That there might be ways in which the world pushes back on you, but we do not encourage you to quit and rewind. We want you to keep playing and live with those choices, because that's the consequence of your action, and that's what makes it feel important in the moment. Similar to the go ahead.
Well, and then that's making one though. Do you, when you're doing that, are you writing and approaching writing the interactive medium the same as a linear screen based story?
Yes and no. I saw a friend of mine made a comment once that said, if you are approaching the outlining and planning of your interactive project the way you would linear, you're approaching it the wrong way. And I haven't had a chance to to debate him on this, but I think that that maybe that's true for going further afield from our shared experience. But I think that, like I said, there's a beginning and there's an end, and the end will be, permuted in a bunch of ways. But the final conflict is the conflict that you're setting up at the beginning. So there is a linearity to it. That said, sort of in the way that you might look at having big key moments in a linear story that you set up, it's like, oh, we got to have this conflict between the good guy and the bad guy, sort of at the midpoint where they've been on let's just do Die Hard, they've been on the radio against each other, and now they're in person together in a scene, and one of them doesn't know that the other one is, but then it turns out he does know and he tricks them. With a choice-based branching narrative story, you have those moments where you're like, okay, but it's only that big moment if you can look at it and say, and this is the other version of it. This is the choice that's in it. This is the branch that makes it interesting, or the sacrifice that makes it interesting. The hard choice. Sometimes sometimes you look at the branch, and sometimes you look at the choice moment. And if you can only get one of those, it's probably not one that it's worth building. You got to have both the choice and the branch and the downstream effects be interesting enough.
I so picture long walls in your house with just like Post-it notes branching in all directions. That's the only way I can even fathom that. On your site, you actually say that your passion for storytelling goes back to playing with action figures in the sand at the beach. So how do you think that early imaginative play influences your approach today when you're designing world building or narrative structure?
Every once in a while, I need to remind myself that in a way it is play. It's a job, and it is a demanding job most of the time, but it's great even when so right now I'm working on a project that is under NDA. I can't talk about what it is, but sometimes it's gracious to tell my friend, I worked on this thing today and it was so much fun. And remembering that it is fun, the act of creation is fun, and it's something that humans do that AI doesn't do, and that we should enjoy it, and it's meaningful. And I have I have a great reverence for storytelling and creativity. My dad is a writer, so it's something I grew up with, and I think it certainly had an impact on looking at things and saying that's a career that a person can have. Like I know a lot of people who do end up in creative fields oftentimes have to discover that that's something that is a job that a person can get. And for me, it was kind of the opposite. I was like, oh, isn't this what all jobs are? Like,
what genre of writing was your dad in?
He writes historical fiction. So,
cool. Nice.
In a lot of ways, similar to what I write for the most part, just different time periods. It's big adventures, and what is it? Big stories told on a broad canvas is the way he usually likes to describe it. And certainly something like Star Trek Resurgence, that fits the bill, I think.
Oh man, it's awesome. So Dan, you mentioned the technical details that go into learning how to do this, and how you intentionally focused on narrative design. So like if you were faced with a group of aspiring writers who wanted to go to school for narrative design, I'm sure there's universities out there that must be teaching this now, like game design and game narrative fiction and stuff. Like what key skills or mindset should they have to be focused on narrative fiction as opposed to screenwriting, as opposed to fiction writing, opposed to literary fiction, etc.? Like what types of skills would you recommend they focus on, whether they're writing focused or or otherwise?
Well, this is something that people ask all the time, and I think the most important thing is if you're not good at writing, that's the biggest hurdle to get over, is to be good at the writing and being able to craft scenes that are compelling from start to finish, that have every part have a turn, have a dramatic question, have conflict. Every scene should have conflict, even scenes of exposition. But going beyond that, and actually I should say also, one of the reasons why I say that's the most important thing is that almost every game job I've ever seen posted, ultimately they ask for a writing sample, and what they're asking for is something that is a linear writing sample. Even if you have produced video game work, a lot of times people just want to see a 5-page scene, and a 5-page scene starting from zero with no idea of who these characters are for the reader to 5 pages in, they've been on some sort of journey and felt something, hopefully. That's very difficult. And so being able to do that, that's the place to start. But that's just the place to start. And it's a competitive marketplace in any creative field, and certainly video games right now. And so anything else that you can do to make yourself more useful, the better. So one is, if you can write something that is branching and show it along with whatever the sort of pro forma request of a 5-page scene is, that's better. There are lots of ways you can do it. You can do it in a program called Twine, which is an open source that's been around for a long time and people are familiar with. You can do it on a website, or even Microsoft Word. You can build something pretty narratively complex just by using the chapter functions and linking to other pages. It might end up being really long, and it might end up being repetitive of content just to get to properly track the flow, but it's doable. And then one step beyond that, from showing not only can I write and write an interesting 5-page scene, I can write something that you can play on your computer, in your web browser, whatever, in 5 minutes, that has interesting choices, and you can go back and play it again. Then beyond that is sort of the everybody looks at writing as a soft skill. There are the harder, the quote unquote harder skills, which I will debate to the end of the day. But that there are skills about, do you know how to use certain game engines that are commonplace, or even if the company's not working with that particular game engine, or they have their own in-house, understanding the way that a game engine works, and there's a common terminology across game engines, those are helpful. One of the guys I worked with, who was a designer and could do just about anything in the game engine, he said that he was when he went to the Army, he didn't tell anybody they could type, because he didn't want to get put on typing duty. But if you're looking to get the job, if you're the only person that can type, that's a pretty good skill to have. And so I've certainly used it in my career, coming from film school and making short films. I've had opportunities to help the process, and I think show my value as a contributor to a project with video editing and sound editing skills, because that's something that I'm very comfortable with. So, for Star Trek Resurgence, I spent some time at various points working on concepts for trailers that we ended up putting together. And at that point, we were pretty well into production, or down the line. It wasn't like I was singing for my supper there, but it was something that was good for the project and fun to do. I enjoy, when you're at the beginning of something so often with a writing, it's fun to have a hand towards the end as well.
Yeah, let's take a little bit into that. Let's talk Star Trek Resurgence. We have to,
Okay.
of course. So, what was that like? You're writing for an existing beloved franchise. What were the unique challenges and creative opportunities of working within an established world with, oh so passionate fans who, if you mess up, they'll talk about you for years? What was that like? That experience?
It was pretty much the dream project for me in a lot of ways, because I was a huge Star Trek fan coming into it. So, the internal barometer felt like it was already finely tuned. When we started the project, we did market research and looked at, what characters and eras are people into. And it was nice because in large part, because it validated basically what I liked. And so we were able to just kind of set our skis downhill and go, because we knew we liked what the audience liked. So that's an easy place to start. But it's also a big responsibility, writing for something that you do care so much about, and many other people do as well. But for me, it was like, I think the closest the person could get for a job that is also like a passion project. I remember, I think I was watching Star Trek 4 on TV, and I was really convinced that they actually had landed a cloaked spaceship in Golden Gate Park. And
I was there when it happened.
You were? Okay, good, cool. I hope you took a picture of nothing.
I have the picture. I do.
Yeah, there you go. And my first job in Hollywood was working on the Paramount lot in the Roddenberry building, not on Star Trek or anything, but I always thought that was cool. And then, something like 15 years later, I was writing Star Trek. It was kind of unbelievable.
And I know you probably told this story 100 times, but I've never heard it. So what was it like? How did you find out that you were in the running to take on this?
Well,
task?
I feel like I had sown the seeds for a very long time, because the people that I worked with at Dramatic Labs, I was part of the first 3 people on this project. It was me and the CEO and founder and executive producer, and we were pitching the project before we even had, all we had was, this is what we do, and this is the license. And so basically, as soon as Kevin Bruner, the Dramatic Labs founder, got the license, called me and said, okay, it's go time, which was very special, because it had been something that had been percolating, because going back for years, like before it was even a glimmer on the horizon, I would talk about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy as this model for making good choices, because and usually there are 3 choices in the kinds of things that I work on, but they build to binary choices where there's this or that. And so in that example, you would imagine McCoy has one side of it, Spock has the other. It's the heart and the mind, and they're both right in their own way. And Kirk has to decide, well, what version of right am I going to go with? And then sometimes it's all 3 of them have different choices, and then or different versions of right, and then it just comes down to Kirk of which one do we go with. And sometimes he doesn't go with his own, and so that that was always something that would be like, okay, what's the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy of this? When talking about how do we make a choice that feels imbalanced come closer, because you want a difficult choice. Easy choices in a game, not a worthwhile choice. It's not worth building if it's not difficult. And so we would go to that example often, and kind of I think that we had at some point a conversation of what's your dream, your dream IP, and I'm sure it was Star Trek. And lo and behold, there it was. And the challenge of it was there was very little restriction from the get-go. It was done through CBS Consumer Products, so the only thing that was off limits was the J.J. Abrams world.
Okay.
And so, trying to figure out what's your favorite Star Trek, and mine was the Next Generation, and it was nice to see that was borne out by a certain amount of market research. Because I know I didn't answer that question at the beginning. It's Next Generation.
No, that's good. Yeah.
And so then it was finding, where is there a hook for a story where we're not going to have every character at our disposal, and to a certain degree, you don't want that in a branching narrative, because you want characters with their fates in question, because that's where the stakes are. And so, we know that's what's going to happen to Spock in the main timeline. So we don't want to worry. We don't want to know, like, well, is Spock going to make it? You don't want to hang your story on that. You want to hang your story on, is Spock going to think that I'm smart in that interaction? That's what that character's question is. Or is Spock going to think that I'm morally reprehensible or illogical? There we go. Perfect. And so for the most part, you want your own characters, but you have these hooks into the canon. And our story is on another podcast, they questioned me because we pulled big elements from what they thought were two of the worst episodes in Next Generation, and then one in Next Generation and one in Deep Space Nine. And I said, well, you don't want to remake Psycho, remake the bad movie, or find an area that has room to grow. Obviously, I think there are good things about those episodes, because otherwise it wouldn't have spun out from them. But it's just a phenomenal sandbox. It's kind of unlike anything else. And I know that Marvel's had their TV shows of late, and Star Wars has had their TV shows. But I think what's interesting is that Star Trek was the TV show before it became movies, and was a TV show through, even when it was making big movies, it was also still an active TV show. That it's a different story world and a different story ethos. And I think that part of it is that there's an ethos, and Star Trek, all Star Trek is kind of about something, and it's about duty and honor and doing the right thing in a way that I don't think that all franchises have baked into them. And that's what makes it great for a choice-based narrative, where you are primed to debate these questions, because every episode has had some question like that in it. And you've said, oh, what would I do if I was Captain Picard? Well, now you get to decide whether it's in Star Trek Resurgence, or if it's in one of the great RPGs for Star Trek Adventures, where you have to decide, what do I believe? And the fun thing with Star Trek Adventures, which I've played a little bit with my friends, is that you then debate amongst your friends. It's not just that we give you a timer and we give you two choices. That's my one real experience with it was we didn't get very far, because it was a homebrew story that we just kept diving deeper and deeper on the debate, that we didn't get to rolling dice a lot.
That's the best games I hear. Me and Jim talk about them all the time. So those are the best games.
I mean, it felt like it was Star Trek, in my living room. And in the same way that I think I've read a lot of wonderful reviews of Star Trek Resurgence, that like this, people say this is the most I've ever felt like I have been in Star Trek. And I love that, because for me, I was in the world of Star Trek when we were making it, and we had our writers' room for this project in February of 2020, and very quickly the world became a very dark place. And being able to go to work every day in the 24th century and say what's the right thing to do, and let science be your guide, and figure out what the most moral choice is, or how to create choices that do feel balanced, as opposed to something where it's pretty obvious there's a dumb way and there's a smart way, and there's a bad way and there's a good way. It was very rewarding. Yeah, I get misty just thinking about it.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's all. I had no idea you played Star Trek Adventures, so I felt very gratified to hear that you enjoy it and play it. It was like all the hard work we put into it over the years has paid off. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And that's the thing about the Star Trek community. People care. People want to be a part of it, and people go all out for it. And I'm sure that there are people playing it right now, and they're probably wearing uniforms, and I think that's awesome. I have had the opportunity to go to Star Trek, or STLV. It's not a officially licensed Star Trek convention, but the Las Vegas Star Trek convention. And there's this, it's been held in the Rio Hotel the past times I've been, and there's a bar called the Masquerade Bar that's along this sort of, it's a casino. It's got this vague directional element to it, but it's very twisting and turning. And at about 11 o'clock at night, whether it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, at this Las Vegas hotel and casino, it feels like you're on the promenade on Deep Space Nine, because and you don't want to ask people like, well, like, oh, what show is your favorite? You kind of ask like, well, so like, are you on shore leave or are you stationed here? It feels like so the world. And people wear costumes. They wear very elaborate costumes sometimes, and sometimes very silly costumes. There was a Patrick Stewart hosted SNL one year during his Next Generation run, and they did a Love Boat skit where they turned the Next Gen uniforms into these vaguely cruise ship outfits. And I saw a group of, it was like 4 guys dressed up as the Love Boat, the Next Generation, and somehow it works. It all works.
I would love to do that. That'd be
you've got somebody dressed as a Horta, and you've got somebody dressed as Patrick Stewart, the cruise ship captain, and it all comes together. And people want to talk about their interest in it. They want to ask about your interest in it. They want to tell their story, and maybe that's something about the TV shows, that every week there's a story, and everybody has a story, and Star Trek lets you have your moment to tell your story. It's a really great community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I love how you set up the narrative within Resurgence. So you got chapter by chapter by chapter and different things going on. I mean, seriously, like when I'm working on Star Trek Adventures and I'm playing it, like I feel like we're kind of in the show sometimes, right? But playing Resurgence took it to another level. So like even just to geek out for a second, like we got the tricorder, we're scanning, we're doing stuff, right? In a way that I don't do it at the game table, right? I'm like, in my day, my group played at the table with our uniforms on, and we had the prop tricorder, we had the Playmates toys with the sound effects and all that stuff, so we could kind of act it out. But in the game, we were actually able to do something, right? You're able to. I mean, there's so many instances of interactive things within the game that just added to that level of immersion that we can't quite get in the RPG. It's just a different perspective, right? So anyway, I really appreciate all the detail that you all put into it, and it didn't hurt that you set it on a Centaur class ship.
Yeah,
and, we included the Centaur class in the Utopia Planitia source book, and I was like, oh, it's just a nice little parallel that we brought it into the game, and then you had it right there in Resurgence.
I had a lot of thoughts about the Centaur class, and that was one of my favorite things about working on it, was looking at all of the possible ships, because we weren't going to set it on a Galaxy class. You want to feel like something is at risk. You want to feel like you don't have the whole fleet behind you. So went through a lot of ships And for me, the Centaur class was an early favorite that I was very glad made it through to the end, because so it's incredible you guys haven't asked this question yet, which is, what is your favorite movie of the franchise? And I have a bunch of them, but the motion picture always gets a lot of love from me in that era in general. But because so much of what Star Trek: The Next Generation was, which is my favorite show, the seeds of it are in the motion picture and the music, the corridors. Like it is in a way that the TV show very locked into the 60s weekly production. The movie brought just a scope that it could never be matched on TV. And until
now.
1987. Well, I was going to say until 1987, because I feel like partly because so much of it was already built. But so it was. There's the Nebula, or the Miranda class and the Excelsior class mashed together. It just felt really TMP, and of course the Undiscovered Country has a similar color scheme to their bridge as our bridge does, and that's not by accident.
Right.
And yeah, fun fact: ours is I think scaled to the Miranda, so the portholes that are on the exterior in some decks are at knee level, because it's the you've taken the Excelsior class and scaled it down, and we just go with it. We say this is the way that it is. This is for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. I could just sit here and geek out all night with you about all these details, but I know we want to be respectful of your time, and I know we're getting close to the hour here. So my last question for you, Dan, is just like, given all the stuff you were talking about, like you were talking about the proprietary platforms that you use in designing things, like you get all the software tools that you use to build things. We know that in like the RPG circles, the virtual tabletops, that technology is changing almost daily, and it still hasn't quite shaken out yet. We're still trying to figure out, what does that technology look like in the next 5-10 years or whatever. And so from your perspective as a narrative designer, and the tools that you're using, where do you see the industry going next? Like what kind of new tools do you think are on the horizon, or should be on the horizon, to make your job easier or more different?
Well, I'm a human and I make art for humans. So I think the question of AI is very much a hot button one that I wonder what's the point if it's going to do what I do. I'm not going to ask it to do my job for me. And if I could ask it to do my job for me, somebody else would ask it to do my job for me, and they wouldn't hire me. So it's kind of a moot point for me. I don't think that it can produce what humans can, and I think we've all seen the Will Smith spaghetti videos as sort of a barometer of what AI can do. And at one point, you ask AI, show me a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti, and it looks a little bit like Goya and a little bit like a fever dream. And then now it looks pretty photoreal. I think as you try to scale things larger with AI, it can give you a line of dialogue. It can give you maybe a page of dialogue. When you get into the scale of something like the video games that I have and am working on, you're talking 1,000 or more pages. And at the current rate, I don't think that AI is going to be able to put that together in a way that is emotionally impactful, maybe ever, but even just comprehensively. Putting aside that hot button topic, in my experience, the technology of making video games is wondrous and constantly evolving, and hugely unstable in the sense that there are always bugs, and you're always fighting with it to make it do the thing that you want it to do. I think it's a testament to the difficulty of making a stable video game, let alone a good video game. It is, having worked on let's just do the video editing portion of it. It's very predictable. If you have a certain amount of footage and you put it in, you can put it together and get a video output from it. I think the realities of physical production on set is a different level of complexity, but just from that post-production, there are certain things that are predictable about it. Every video game I've ever worked on, it just, you have moments where, whether it's your department or somebody else's department, you see people pulling out their hair because it's just like, why is this not doing what I want it to do? It's like, well, because you're trying to make an entire world inside of a rock that you have hit with electricity, and it is difficult. And so the technology is going to continue to evolve. It's going to get more powerful, but it's always going to be fighting its own complexity. And sort of the more detailed your facial models get for a video game character, the better your animations have to be to make it look good. So there is an exponential element to it. And there comes a point probably where fidelity is not going to be as much of a driver of value. Like, I think about video games that I played 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Do they look less advanced compared to today? Maybe a little, but like not the way it did back when I was a kid. And you go from the Nintendo to the Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64. Those were just completely different ways of seeing and experiencing a video game. And now I think it has the visual fidelity is absolutely still evolving, and there are people, phenomenal artists and people, technical artists and people that work on the programming side that make that happen. But we're almost reaching a point of simulation that is going to be hard to tell, and even be hard to tell from reality. And then it comes down to, is the game fun? Is the game?
I want to ask you a question about that right there. My mind is boggled when Minecraft came out, because I'm like, why are my nieces and nephews into this? This is weird looking blocks, or even Roblox. The games that people are producing there that are becoming hits that are not advanced. I played Nabunga when I was a kid. I don't know if you know Nabunga on Nintendo. It was Japanese fiefdoms basically, and the graphics were horrible, but we were addicted to it, me and my friends. And so I really like what you just said about storytelling. With that said, if people are looking to get into the video game industry as storytellers, how do they compete against the high graphics? Like, what's happening? What are the trends going on that you're seeing that someone who wants to become a video game storyteller should really be focused on? Since nowadays, like I said, a Minecraft can become the biggest game on the planet,
Well, I think it's not every game has the same amount of storytelling in it. One of the challenges of starting a video game, if you're going to be the person that creates it or part of the early phase of it, is deciding what goes into your stone soup of an experience. Because you look at something like a game of tennis, and there's a narrative element to it that plays out. We can look at what happened, the events, and overlay a sense of drama and progression. But the rules of tennis are not a story. The story is something somewhat ancillary to it. And some of the great stories in our lives, if you're a sports fan, come out of this set of rules and then the extra elements of people and that you put into it. But it starts with, probably starts with somebody saying, if it were a video game, okay, well, they've got a field and there are two ends. We've got an oblong pointed spheroid, and you can throw it forward, but you can't you can't throw it forward if you're in front of a certain line. And it's like all these rules that you build up, but then at some point maybe somebody comes along and says, okay, well, there's the starting quarterback, then there's the backup quarterback. The backup quarterback is pretty good, and the starting quarterback gets hurt. Backup quarterback comes in, takes them all the way to the AFC Championship game, and the backup quarter gets hurt. And the starting quarterback comes back in, and he's really good, and he wins the game. And then the Patriots go on to win the Super Bowl in 2001. Pretty great story. But was that was not necessarily the story that they planned when they created, say, the game of football. And so this is your Scrabble word of the day: Ludo-Narrative. Ludology being the study of how systems work, and then narrative. And there's the concept is often described as Ludo-Narrative Dissonance.
I just
where,
Googled it.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Ludo-Narrative Dissonance, where sort of the systems that drive a game, and that can be things like Halo had kind of the perfect balance, rock, paper, scissors style of melee weapon, grenades, and firearms, essentially, where you had those things worked in great combination for a fun style of first-person combat. That's the system. And you can broadly increase the system to say you start in this point, you generally have multiple pitched battle engagements. You don't fight a boss. Instead, you want to get to a certain point and flip a switch that ends the level, and you move on to the next one.
Yeah.
But then there's the narrative, and the narrative has to say, okay, well, who are the people that we're going to save? Why are we here? Why do we crash on this ring world? And in some games, those things are, I mean, in every game, there's a moment where those things come up against each other. And I'm sure that you guys have experienced that with saying, okay, well, how does the story that we are telling, we have built to this moment, kind of bumps up against the mechanics of this game, and how do we make those things work? Kind of a typical, one of the most common examples are where you have a character who needs to know something to do the gameplay part, but doesn't know it in the story yet. So you either have to figure out a way to make them know it so they can do the thing, or just say, well, we're just going to throw up a text that says this is how they do it, and you don't address it in the story. That's one common.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too. Nathan Dowdell, who's the designer for Star Trek Adventures, came on, and he was making that point right there, is that if you want to play a journaling game or a narrative game, go do that. You don't need any dice. If you want just to play with dice and probability, you don't need a story. But if you're going to play an RPG, you got to have the perfect combination of both of them.
Yeah,
and that's the difference. So that's, I guess, would that count as Ludo-Narrative Dissonance?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. I learned a new word. Fantastic. That is so fascinating. We go into, we love the background. Dan, with you speaking, it's so important for listeners out there to understand there's so many varieties and ways to write. Nowadays, there's so many varieties and ways to write Star Trek. It's funny, we had recently on the show Heather Antos, who did the first Choose Your Own Adventure. I happen to have it here because we were talking about it, which was the first Choose Your Own Adventure. And whoever thought there would be a Star Trek Choose Your Own Adventure? I think it was the first IP to really do that, like a major IP. So I really appreciate you coming on and showing, hey, you know what? Someone wants to be a video game writer. That's a whole nother genre to learn an expertise behind, as we can see from everything you're mentioning. So amazing insights. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on to talk. I don't know if you gathered, but I could probably keep talking about this all night.
I'm selfishly thinking I can't wait to have him back on to continue the conversation. That's why we're called Continuing Conversations, because we literally, like Jim said at the top, we never thought we'd be 4 to 5 years into this. We were going to do 10 episodes at first, and now we're going into year 5. So
wow,
there's so much in the industry and so much talent like you to talk about.
And so many great folks like you who are willing to talk to us about it and geek out with us for a little bit. So Dan, before we go into gratitude, where can people find you, and what cool projects do you want to promote or talk about, or anything you can talk about? I know the umbrella of NDAs are always over our heads, but any cool things that you can share?
You can find me at danmartinmedia.com. It is updated more frequently when I have more stuff coming out. It was fast and furious as Star Trek Resurgence was coming out, but right now I'm working on a AAA game for that is under NDA, but it is, like a lot of my work, it is an IP-based project that is something I'm very excited about, and kind of in the same way that with Star Trek and some of the other stuff I've worked on, you kind of got to pinch yourself every once in a while and say, like, I get to write for this character that I have loved for this long, and get to make them do what I want to do. And maybe that's part of my gratitude, is that I do get to play make believe for work, and it is oftentimes demanding work. It is hard work, but it is work that I enjoy very much, and I'm grateful for that.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to creative folks like yourself and Michael and so many others who can take narrative in all of its many forms and do something really cool and amazing with it, whether you're working in an IP or something original. I'm always inspired just talking to folks like you, and then also just getting to enjoy the games that you make, right? Like I've dumped a lot of hours into Resurgence, and just talking to you now, I need to go start it up again and another playthrough and see if I can take some of those branching paths in ways that I didn't the first time. Because I was trying to be so Starfleet the first time. Maybe I need to do something a little different. So I'm grateful for you and for other creatives that really keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with narrative in all of its many forms. Michael, let's close with you. What's your gratitude, buddy?
Yeah, I'm taking it to the old school, and I'm going to thank the writers of Nobunaga's Ambition. I mispronounced. I was looking at it, I was like, oh, I called it Nabunga as a 15-year-old kid that I wasted 11 hours a day on for like all summer. But the developer and publisher was Koei out of Japan. And again, it was like a historical fiction. It was based, a historical simulation is probably the better word to say. But thank you for making me play. It was such a good story that I played it so long that when my friend's mom walked in the house, she went pew, because we hadn't bathed probably like in 3 days. I love video games that are that immersive. So putting that out there in the universe. All right, Dan, thank you again, and we will have you back on.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you, man.
There's someone me and Jim are definitely going to have back on the show. We want to thank you all for tuning into our Dan Martin interview. We will see you next week when we have with us the amazing Larry Nemesek. If you know the name, you know the name. Tune in next week. Live long and prosper, and IDIC.